Remember when I said I didn't like Leprechaun? And I've been thinking about getting the Blu ray box set. Why would I buy all these DVDs if I don't like Leprechaun? Well, why don't we talk about it? Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Horror Movie Syllabus. I'm Professor Victor, and today we're doing something a little bit different. If you're new to the Horror Movie Syllabus, you can check out our introduction video in the link down below in the description, and it'll give you an idea about what we usually do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. But today, we're going to do something that's a little bit more personal to me, a little bit more of an explanation on what I feel about horror movies in general, and how my horror tastes have evolved over time, and why it leads to the broad scope of the horror movie syllabus today. So the idea for this video came when I was talking to my friend Heath over at Serial at Midnight. And if you're not familiar with Serial at Midnight, it's a YouTube channel and website where they explore physical media. So movies and music and books and comic books, all the stuff that I love, frankly. And Heath and I were talking about when we buy DVDs or Blu-rays of movies that we don't particularly like all that much. And why do we do that? But people ask, why would you do that? And he had brought up a point that it's nice to have a movie and then revisit it later on. You didn't care for it all that much to begin with. And then later on, it's like your tastes have evolved. It's grown on you. And now you like it. And he and I both had examples of those kinds of movies. And my example in that conversation was the Leprechaun movies. As you may have seen in my Small Creatures video when I discussed Leprechaun, I did not love that movie when I first saw it. In fact, I very much disliked that movie. And I tell this funny story about when I was on a date. I saw it at a drive-in. Worth listening to that story in that video if you get a chance. I won't repeat it here. But I did not like that movie when I first saw it, and now I have an affection for it. And when Heath and I were talking about this, it was like, well, why is that? Why is it when we come back to these movies that we liked or didn't like in the past, and wind up liking them now? What's changed? Is it maturity? Is it different like different life circumstances? What is it about that? And what does it mean? And he thought it might be a fun idea for a video for me. Gave me the idea for this video. Thank you, Heath, for that. Gave me the name for this video. Thanks again, Heath. And if you haven't checked out Serial at Midnight, I'll leave a link to that in the description below as well, so you can give Heath some love. So what I thought I'd do today is to kind of talk about how my horror tastes might have changed, or how my horror journey has been, by talking about the Leprechaun movies, and then talk about how that's applying to the horror movie syllabus in general now. So as I mentioned, I didn't like the original Leprechaun movie. I thought it was terrible. And at that time period, this is 1993 or so. At that time period is when I'm starting to get out of horror. I've talked about this before. My 1990s horror malaise, where horror got really bad, and I was just kind of out on it. And that is generally true. In fact, if you watched the video where I talk about the Scream movies, kind of reinvigorated horror, you'll see that I talk about how Scream saved horror, and it was kind of in a bad spot before that. And I'm not the only person who thinks this. This is actually a pretty common belief, or well-held belief. Leprechaun's kind of early in that time frame, but it kind of does for me mark one of the earlier films that started to really turn me off to horror movies. And I think the reason why is I was expecting my horror movies to be more serious than Leprechaun. If not necessarily totally dead serious, because remember, I liked Friday the 13th movies and stuff like that. I expected them to be more serious than that. I expected them to have some scare factor to them. Mind you, I'm in my teens at this point, and so from my teens to my early 20s, I think I'm just taking myself too seriously at that time. I think that I have this very narrow view of what horror is supposed to be, and it's supposed to be scary, and it's supposed to do certain things, and it shouldn't be too comedic. And that's a really narrow-minded view. And again, I'm younger then, but you would think when you're younger, when you're a kid, you would think that you're more open-minded to things, and you have a broader idea of things. You're not too set in your ways, and you're open-minded and willing to try new things. But I didn't find that to be the case for myself at all. And then To be fair, I was kind of a more serious kind of person, I think, in the sense I kept trying to grow up a little too quickly. Like I got married young. I went to college young. I graduated college early. I was always in a hurry to move on to the next thing and kind of become an adult, and that might have translated a bit to my tastes as well. Like maybe I just took things a little too seriously, and everything was just kind of like a big serious deal for me. Um, but I don't know that that's true for all like younger people. In fact, I watch a lot of YouTube, of course, and a lot of the people I watch are like Gen X or younger millennials, and they seem to be much more open-minded than I was at their age, or even now, for that matter. They're really open to trying older things and being open to them, even though they're not the cool new hip thing, or even though that they feel a little dated or whatever. They seem much more open-minded. Like I watch reaction videos of people watching like The Exorcist and stuff like that, and they're very open to it. They listen to old music and they're very open to it, even though it's not maybe what they are used to. Meanwhile, I'm Gen X, right? So I'm fastly approaching middle age, and I'm kind of set in my ways. I like the music I like, and I used to think that when I was a kid that I would always be on the cool cutting edge of music because I was such a music guy. Um, I am not, man. Um, you asked me to name all of my favorite bands. Not one of them came out this decade or last decade. And you when you're younger, you think you're going to be that way forever, and as you get older, you get set in your ways. It just happens. But what I'm talking about here is kind of the opposite. I'm talking about not being set in my ways and getting more open minded as I've gotten older. And the Leprechaun movies are the reflection of that. So, like I said, I didn't like the first Leprechaun movie, and as a result, didn't even get into the sequels. By the time Leprechaun in the Hood came out, I was definitely not on board with watching a Leprechaun movie. I was just like, no, thank you. I'm not interested in that at all. And really had to be convinced to watch it. I think it was just because I was with a group of friends and they wanted to watch it. It's kind of like a silly, like movie night type thing. And I think I got talked into it because Ice-T was in it, and I liked hip hop back in the day. Not so much into hip hop now. Case in point. Um, but I was able to be talked into it, and from the get go, the movie was funny. Like Ice-T pulling weapons out of his afro, stuff like that. It set the tone for what the movie was going to be, and I was able to get into it. I actually really liked Leprechaun the Hood. It's one of my favorite of the Leprechaun movies, and I would have never ever guessed that. From the title alone, I would never have guessed that. But it knew what it wanted to be early on, and it sent that message to the audience. It conveyed that message. It let us know, hey, don't take this too seriously. We're not. And I didn't. And I don't know if it's because I was with my friends, so I was in a good mood, I'm having a good time, I'm kind of having some fun, having some laughs, or if I was just a little bit older and not so serious about it. Horror has to be serious or has to be, scary, or if it was just the movie did a good job of finding the horror comedy balance and conveying that to me, or maybe just a combination of all of that. For whatever the case was, it worked. It worked, and I started to think about the Leprechaun series and horror movies a little bit differently at that point. Now, the neat thing about it was I was able to easily go back and watch the other Leprechaun movies that had come before because I had this. Now, this is a 4-disc set of the first 4 Leprechaun movies. I think I showed this when I was talking about Leprechaun in the previous video. And I already had this movie, or this 4-disc set, when I saw Leprechaun in the Hood. Now, why did I have this movie set? I don't like Leprechaun. I didn't like the first movie. I didn't watch the other movies. I'll tell you why. I had seen it on sale for like $6 at a store. And at that point, I was considering myself a horror collector. I was really into horror movies. It was like my thing, and I was collecting horror movies. So even though I didn't like the Leprechaun series, it had enough of a following and it had enough cachet that I felt like it needed to be in the collection to have a complete collection. I needed to have that movie represented. And so it was a cheap and cost-effective way to do that, even though I didn't really want it. But then, now I had it. I had it to watch. Now that I was more interested in trying to give Leprechaun a second chance after watching In the Hood, I had it there at my fingertips. And that's what Heath was talking about. Having these movies preserved in your collection so you can pull them off the shelf whenever you want to watch them. You're not subject to streaming or anything like that, or having to go and rent it or find it. It's right there. And there's something to be said for that. And Heath goes into that much more on his channel, so I'll let that be his domain. But for me, I liked having that right there. I was able to rewatch the original movie and had a newfound appreciation for it. All the stuff that seemed to bother me, all the jokes and silliness of it, I actually really enjoyed this time around. Warwick Davis, who I was sad to see in the movie because I was a big Star Wars fan, and still am, now became like the best part of the movie to me. He's so much fun in this movie, and he's aware of the movie he's in. He's having a gleeful good time with it. Jennifer Aniston, who I like quite a bit, in one of her early roles, is fun to watch, not because she's particularly good in the movie, but because it's Jennifer Aniston. Um, the movie is its own unique blend of campy horror, something that I was not open to when it came out, but something that I became much more open to as time went on. And so I was glad to have an ability to go back, revisit that movie with fresh eyes, and see it more for what it was. Now, that's not to say that all the Leprechaun movies wind up being really, really good. The second movie is not good. To this day, I don't like that movie very much. It's probably, in my opinion, the worst of the series, and I don't remember it very well. And that's probably why I give it the ding that I give it. Every time I think of that movie, I have a hard time remembering what it's about. It's like the leprechaun trying to get his bride, which, by the way, doesn't hold up so well in today's modern sensibilities. But the movie is forgettable, and that's like the worst crime. Like if you're bad but you're memorably bad, at least that's noteworthy. This is just forgettable, and it's by as a result my least favorite of the movies. But then part three comes along, and part three is maybe my favorite of the whole series. It's a blast. The leprechaun goes to Vegas, and the leprechaun's greed and the Vegas motif, everybody's greed. It's like a marriage made in heaven. Like the kills are really interesting and fun in that one. The comedy works really well. That movie knows exactly what it wants to do. By the time the leprechaun's mimicking Elvis, I'm in. It's a blast. To me, it's the first movie that gets the formula really right. That it's really more campy fun and comedy than horror, but with still some gross kills and a leprechaun that's just got a bunch of funny one-liners and just acts silly. It's got the formula down right. That might be the best one to me, for sure, because that movie, The Leprechaun should always be in Vegas, man. That movie is really great. And then you get Leprechaun 4, where it's Leprechaun in space. And I wish I liked that movie a little bit more than I did. I do think it's fun. But as you know, I'm a Friday the 13th fan. And if you saw my Friday the 13th video, you know I love Jason X. Even though it's not one of my favorites in the series, I do love it. And Jason X has the same general premise as Leprechaun and also has the same budget constraints. They're both low budget movies trying to look more expensive. And Jason X does it far more effectively than Leprechaun does. The Leprechaun movie looks really cheap. It looks like a 1960s Star Trek episode. And it's unfortunate because the movie is fun, but the set and stuff kind of take me out of it a little bit. But I do like it. It's middle of the pack for me, the Leprechaun in space. I ding it maybe a little unfairly because it's not as good as Jason X in my opinion, but it is fun. And then we got the Leprechaun in the Hood. So as you can see right there, my whole opinion of the franchise has evolved. But then this happens. Leprechaun goes back to the Hood. And this should have been fun. Having seen Leprechaun in the Hood, I had expectations for this movie. Those expectations were not met. Ironically, the problem with Leprechaun Back to the Hood is that it tries to take itself a little more seriously. The Leprechaun doesn't even show up. He's at the very beginning of the movie, and it's actually a pretty good scene, and then he's gone for like a half an hour. And it's like only an hour and a half movie. It's like a third of the movie. He's not there, and it's about these people living in the hood, trying to get their lives together and their personal dramas and stuff, and their comic relief. And the characters aren't very interesting, and for the most part, not tremendously likable. It's boring, and the serious take on it is not fun. And then when the leprechaun does show up, he's mostly not that funny. There's one little scene where he gets high that kind of works, but for the most part, he's not that funny. He's not that interesting, and he's kind of hamstrung. He doesn't even rap in the movie. The first movie he raps, and he doesn't even rap in this movie. It really lost the sense of fun that Leprechaun in the Hood had and tried to make it more serious, which I think is ironic that I don't like this movie because originally I didn't like Leprechaun because it didn't take itself seriously enough, and now I didn't like this Leprechaun because it was taking itself seriously, or kind of taking itself seriously, and that's a bizarre irony. I kind of came full circle on this. I wanted the silly, campy Leprechaun, and it wasn't giving enough of that to me. And by the time I get it towards the end, it's too little, too late. No pun intended. So, yeah, I bring this for two reasons. One is to illustrate the weird flipping, the weird irony of me liking the movie less because it was more serious. But also to point out that just because my tastes have evolved and I'm more into campy humor doesn't mean I like everything. It doesn't mean I'm open to any horror movie. I mean, I just recently talked about Pet Sematary in one of our videos. That's a movie I didn't like early on. Really disliked it. And I revisited it recently, and I still really don't like it. And that's okay. My taste didn't evolve on that one, but other people do like it, and it's okay that they like it. Um, I just want to point out that just because I've become much more broad and open to horror in general doesn't mean I like every movie. You might think it if you look at my collection or some of my recommendations. But there are movies I don't like, Pet Sematary being one of them, Leprechaun Back to the Hood being another one. On that note, this movie came out as well. And Leprechaun Origins was supposed to be like a reimagining of the Leprechaun franchise, which it is. But that's not necessarily a good thing. In fact, in this case, it's very much not a good thing. Leprechaun Origins has a whole new creative team behind it, and it's like from a wrestling standpoint, and it's trying to make the Leprechaun scary again and making him into an actual like monster, which is not a bad idea. I'm actually open to that concept, but it's not fun at all. Like the Leprechaun doesn't even talk. He doesn't have any rhymes. He doesn't say anything. Um, and because it's low budget, you don't even get a very good look at him. And normally I can champion that and say, oh, you're adding to the scares and things like that, the dread and everything. But no, in this case, it just smacks of cheapness. You know, you get leprechaun vision, which is like predator vision. It's it's not great. Um, and it abandons everything that was fun about Leprechaun, everything that I'd come around to, everything that I'd learned to appreciate, everything that I had learned to start loving about the franchise is missing from this installment, and that's noteworthy to me that I don't like that movie, and by all accounts, I should have liked that movie more than any of the other Leprechaun movies, but I don't. It's one of my least favorite. Maybe not quite as disappointing as part two because at least I remember it, but disappointing nonetheless. And I at that point had become a full-on Leprechaun fan. I enjoy the series; it's a lot of fun, and that movie wasn't a Leprechaun movie. It just didn't feel like it. And I know I'm not alone in this. Pretty much every Leprechaun fan feels this way about that movie. Fortunately, this came out, Leprechaun Returns, and Leprechaun Returns wound up being a total blast. Now, the thing about Leprechaun Returns is it's going back to the roots of the franchise, literally back to the first movie, being a direct sequel to that movie. One thing we didn't talk about this, the Leprechaun series is always the same actor except for Leprechaun Origins, but not necessarily the same Leprechaun. It's a little up for debate as to whether or not he's the same character. The continuity is not clear on the series, but this one is definitely a direct sequel to the first one, which is a lot of fun. Unfortunately, it doesn't have Warwick Davis. It's the one that doesn't have the same actor playing the Leprechaun, which is really unfortunate. And it's what keeps the movie from being my favorite Leprechaun movie. Because otherwise, the movie is a great blend of comedy, horror, and self awareness. Like it's got that kind of meta scream type vibe to it that I really like. This movie is really well written. It's a lot of fun. It's got characters that are really interesting or at least fun to watch. The lead actress is quite good, and I was surprised. I didn't think I was going to like her, but she really pulled it out for me. And the other characters are fun too, and they're not quite what you'd expect. Some of them are caricatures, and that works pretty well. But I had a lot of fun watching them. So even the setup of the movie was enjoyable to me. It's really well shot. It's one of the best produced Leprechaun movies. The effects look good. The movie looks good. Has a good look to it. Doesn't look so cheap. And the guy playing the new Leprechaun is quite good. I'm just bummed that it's not Warwick Davis. That's all. He actually gives a great performance. And I'm sure they're probably looking at him going forward because he's maybe younger. Warwick maybe has better things to do. He's doing some Star Wars movies and stuff. But I missed Warwick, and that's the only thing that keeps it from being number one on my list. But it's really, really good. It was a return to form for the series, and it's, to me, the best example of what the series can be. So going back to the original premise of this video, how our taste can evolve leaves us open-minded enough to discover loving new things and gives opportunities for movies, franchises, whatever, to win us over. And I think that's the value of this. My tastes have changed. I've gotten more open-minded. I'm not 100% sure why. It may be pure nostalgia. It may be movies that I just disliked when I was younger, have stuck around or hung around enough, like Leprechaun, that I've just been won over by it, been worn down, kind of like a song that you hear when you're younger that you just hate, but it gets played and played and played, and then 10 years later or 15, 20 years later, you find yourself singing along when it comes on the radio because it's got that nostalgia thing to it. We did talk about nostalgia in other videos and how nostalgia plays a big part in horror. We've talked about this in the comments a lot too. The movies I loved as a kid that I know are not particularly that good, I still have a big love for them, like slasher movies in general. I love slasher movies, even though they're not necessarily all that good, because I loved them as a kid and that nostalgia clicks in. And maybe that's part of it, the nostalgia of just something from when you were younger, even if you didn't like it, you kind of have an affection for it now. Maybe that's part of what's happening to me. Maybe it's that I've just spent so much time watching horror and stuff like that, and Scream kind of really brought me back into horror that I've become more open-minded to it now. I don't want to be the closed-minded person I was then. Maybe that's what it is. I'd like to be able to take credit for that and say I'm noble and I've grown as a person and I've evolved. I'd like to take some credit for that, and maybe I will take a little bit of credit for that because this is, my journey, and it's led to the horror movie syllabus. And that's kind of what I'm getting at here is that for whatever reason, I've been able to be a little bit more open-minded to horror as a whole. I now am a big fan of saying yes to horror. Yes to embracing it and giving it a try, and also yes to accepting it as horror. So, for example, one of the things that I always say is that thriller movies aren't necessarily horror movies because, well, we'll get into it more when I talk about thriller movies in the horror movie syllabus, but essentially they're more focused on like, the police catching a killer than they are on like the victims or the killers, whereas horror movies are focused on a victim or a killer. But other people do find thrillers to be horror. Like they'll say Silence of the Lambs is a horror film. And I used to say Silence of the Lambs isn't a horror film. But I do say it is now, even though I didn't really share that opinion so much. I'm more inclusive of it now, as evidenced by the fact that thrillers are a subgenre on the horror movie syllabus, and we will be talking about them. And spoiler alert, we'll be talking about Silence of the Lambs. But I want to say yes to horror. I want to have more subgenres included because the more horror, the better. I love horror movies, and I want there to be more of them. And I don't know why anybody who loves horror wouldn't feel the same way. I know that gatekeeping's become a big thing now. People kind of saying this is what horror has to be. And I don't want to get too much into that because there are plenty of other people having this debate online. And I'll just say that I fall in the line of being more open and encompassing and broad-minded when it comes to horror. I don't want to say, no, this isn't horror, or this isn't specific horror, or that's not a real horror movie. I want to say, yeah, it is horror, and even if it's not what scares me or what I generally think of as horror, somebody else does, and that's good enough. And I value their opinion because they're a horror fan too. I want horror fans to have more to love, not less. I don't know why anybody wants to exclude or narrow it. I guess maybe people want to have an exclusive club to belong to, but frankly, there's enough room for all of us in here. And no matter what, if you let in all of the horror fans who love all the different kinds of horror, even the stuff that you don't think is horror, we're still a minority. We're still an exclusive club, and everybody still looks down on us as a lesser than genre of film. As evidenced by the fact that, again, a lot of people try to call Silence of the Lambs an Oscar-winning horror movie, not a horror movie, because horror, not a prestige type thing, are not thought of as a serious horror, not a serious film genre. So we're already at a disadvantage. So why do we want to infight? Why do we want to have factions or exclude people from the club? We should come together on that. And I think that's what I've been trying to promote on my channel, is everybody come together. That's why I'm always inviting you in the comments to share your opinions, especially if you disagree with me. Again, I want everybody to be civil. I don't want people to criticize each other for their selections or something like that. If you think one of my selections is wrong, tell me. Tell me in a polite way or in a discussion way, and we'll have a discussion about it. And I do my best to not tell people that they're wrong, even though I think it's kind of funny to tell people they're wrong, because I want people to feel like it's a safe space to share their love of horror. Generally speaking, people watching these videos are horror fans, and so if you're a horror fan, you are my friend and you are welcome here. And that's the thing that I want to promote. And a lot of people out there, I hope that they change their views like I have and become a little bit more inclusive to horror. You can look at something that's not horror, or that you feel is not horror, or that you don't feel is very good now, and 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, you might see it differently. And the benefit of that is you might find out something else that you love or something else that you can enjoy. I am of the opinion that the more that we have to enjoy, the better. Look at all this. This is stuff that I love. I enjoy it. it's varying quality, and I have varying levels of affection for what's on here. And I haven't watched everything here. I know some people were going to ask this. Have you seen all the movies here? No, not yet. And there are movies over there and over there and over there. There's a lot to watch, and the to-do list is super long, but I have those to watch, and I have the affection for them. And I try to take a movie for what it is, not what I want it to be. And ever since I've taken that approach, I enjoy movies so much more, and I enjoy my life so much more. I'm a happier individual because of it. Maybe that's me getting soft in my old age. I don't know, but I am happier, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to share that with you, to tell you guys how my tastes about Leprechaun specifically and horror in general have shifted, evolved, grown, gotten broader, and led us to the point where we can have the horror movie syllabus and talk about all different kinds of subgenres, 100 different subgenres, and different things that people can like and talk about and enjoy and debate in a fun, safe way. I don't know. I think that's pretty cool. And I hope you guys do too. I'm also hoping that maybe this relates to you in some way. Like maybe you've had a similar experience or a similar revelation, or maybe you're like one of those people that I've talked about on YouTube who are just very open-minded in general already. And I envy those people. I admire those people that just like take things and just take them for their merits and can kind of appreciate them for what they are, try to find the good in them. I love those kind of people. And if you're one of those kind of people, let's hear about these in the comments. I'd like to hear your stories in the comments, your personal stories about your experience with horror going on throughout the years, or if you've always loved it and still love it, or if you're not open-minded about it, if you really think that horror is more myopic or specific, I'm open to hearing your thoughts on that as well too. Again, I'm not going to tell you that that's the wrong way to go. I think that being broad-minded and all-encompassing with horror is more rewarding, but that's me. If you have a different opinion, share that. I will respect your opinion, I promise. But I am looking forward to hearing you guys share some of your personal thoughts as well on this and some of your personal experiences, because I feel you guys are a community. I feel you guys are my friends now. And I wanted to share this little piece of myself and my background with you, a little piece of the origins of the horror movie syllabus, the humble beginnings of it, if you will. And I'm hopeful that you'll share some of you guys' personal experiences as well. But thank you very much for sticking with me through this video. Hopefully it wasn't too rambling and meandering. And for those of you who are looking for a little bit more in-depth series, talk about the Leprechaun series, I know I kind of glossed through it. I didn't really go into it too in-depth, and I didn't even rank them specifically. If you're looking for Leprechaun rankings, Josh over at Movie Timelines is doing a dead last on the Leprechaun series that if it's not out right now, when you're watching this, it should be out very, very shortly. If it is out, I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. I contributed my rankings to that. So he aggregates everybody's rankings that contribute and gives a little bit more of a scientific ranking list. They're a lot of fun. I highly recommend those series. And the Leprechaun one should be a lot of fun too. But I'm not going to rank them here because A, Josh is doing a far better job than I ever could. And B, I kind of give you my thoughts on them now. The ranking is irrelevant and can change. And that's kind of the whole point. My thoughts on these change, Leprechaun Returns misses the top spot for me, but maybe it will get bumped up to the top spot because I really enjoyed that movie. But if you're looking for more Leprechaun content, go look at Josh's videos. They're great. A lot of other people have talked about the Leprechaun stuff too. I wanted to talk about something a little bit more personal, using the Leprechaun series as kind of a prism through which to examine it. I wanted to share this with you guys. So I hope you found it interesting and not tedious. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to let me share this with you and kind of get a little bit more personal with you. Next week, we're back to school. We're back to class. We're getting right back into the horror movie syllabus with some other awesome stuff. I think you're going to like what we've got coming up. We've been getting through these subgenres pretty well, and the community keeps growing and growing. So thank you guys for that as well. I'm looking forward to next week. I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys say this week in the comments, and I've been looking forward to reading your comments every week. You guys have been amazing, and I could not be happier with what's going on in the comments and with you guys and your support and subscribing and liking and leaving comments. It means the world to me, guys. It's really been something special, and it's exactly why I started the channel. Not to get rich off of YouTube or to become famous or anything like that, but to find people who like talking about horror movies, because frankly, most of my friends don't like horror, and the ones that do, surface level. They don't give any kind of concern about Leprechaun Returns, So I'm glad you guys are here. I really appreciate all of you, and I thank you guys for your time. I know you have other things to watch, so thank you for watching this one. With that, class dismissed.